Welcome, everyone, to the Psych Soul podcast, where we awaken your medicine within so you can live epic through psychedelic integration. I'm Shiri, and today I started my integration ritual with singing, and not just any singing, but more like a freestyle singing meditation. My daughter, Mila, who is currently 6 years old, has been developing this new hobby in the past month or so of walking around the house and literally freestyling and songwriting songs in the moment. And she's amazing at it. And today I was sitting at my altar where most mornings I take a moment to center and pray and gaze at my vision board. And I spontaneously started singing the prayer and whatever was coming into my field and felt good. And I felt like I was surrendering my voice and allowing it to sound what needed to sound. And amazingly, it took a life of its own, and the most beautiful melodies came out, and it was like they were being channeled by someone or something else. So freestyle sound play is an incredible integration ritual, not just for meditative practice, but as an integration ritual post-ceremony. It's a somatic technique to help process and release energy, to reinforce new neural pathways, to open up your voice and gain more confidence in your truth and in yourself. And of course, you can also use it to record your journey if you use your voice recorder app on your phone. So at this moment, I feel good, I feel whole, and I'm ready to roll. And I have a very special guest here today. So before I introduce her, just a quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not in any way, shape, or form condone the use of illicit substances or partaking in any illegal activities. Everything that we talk about on the podcast, the ceremony specifically, take place in jurisdictions where the medicine is legal. So if you do decide to make a choice to engage with powerful psychedelics and plant medicines, please do so mindfully. My guest today is Natasha Pelgrom.
Yes.
She's the founder. Yes, welcome. She's the founder of Awaken the Medicine Within, Retreats and Education. She is a medicine woman, a visionary leader, and a consultant. She is renowned for her highly intuitive guidance and has played instrumental roles in over 1,000 psychedelic ceremonies, serving as a trainer, facilitator, and assistant. And her aim is to empower practitioners and executives to thrive in their services by focusing on impact and change. Natasha, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here because I just want to drop in immediately and just share that I recall back in the day, which is about a decade ago, I was searching the interwebs and longing to have someone speak and write about integration from a perspective that was resonant with me. And you were one of them, which was only a handful at the time. So you functioned very much to me as an inspiration and someone on the other side of the pond, because I'm in the Netherlands, and at that time I think you were in the US, so correct me if I'm wrong. But it was like, oh, she's so far away. Why aren't we around the corner? We have so many things alike. So along the years, we've never connected, but now I'm here, so I'm so delighted because the Natasha from 10 years ago is excited as much as the Natasha from today. So I just want to acknowledge that moment.
Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you so much. I have chills, and it's interesting because I had no clue, right? And you know, this is something that when you go through the motions as a builder in what we call the psychedelic renaissance, you don't truly know like who your work impacts, unless of course you work with them directly, but who your work impacts, how, like who it may reach, where your message is. And sometimes it just like feels like you're working yourself to the bone. You don't know what is happening. And then like, look at that, like 10 years later, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I received that. Yeah. Thank you so much. And so 1,000 ceremonies, Natasha. So you have had an opportunity to build super intimate relationships with medicine, and just, that's a lot of ceremonies. So what medicines do you specialize in, and what do you feel they are here to teach us?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. on multiple levels. So first of all, I just want to immediately put a little Natasha disclaimer here, because my path has been that of, I sometimes try to avoid these words, but sometimes I just have to use them. I've been so guided for my whole life in such a clear way that at the age of almost 45, I now get it, how I was guided in so many ways. So I am at heart really, really a student of so many different walks of life, so many different traditions, so many peers, so many scientists, psychologists, medicine elders. So many people from so many places have been able to be a teacher and also a peer and a friend, and a willingness to teach me and share what they know to the capacity that they wanted to share it. So I'm standing on shoulders of people that have been very generous in my life and sometimes really called upon something that is bigger than us, and where literally I have a prayer in my heart, and you were saying about song, and I had a prayer and a song in my heart, and then within 24 hours, someone calls me and says, I have someone you need to meet. And then 2 months later, I meet them, and they've been showing up in my dreams. So this is like the life of unfolding of how it goes, because I want to credit that, because a lot of the times, and especially in this Renaissance, I really appreciate my peers who have studied in the field of psychology and clinical psychology, and I find it extremely important, this field. But sometimes there is only a validation if you have that PhD behind your name. Or when you've only walked a specific tradition, which I believe in both. There's not a judgment or a belief system. I believe in both. But in my personal journey with medicine, and I will answer your question, but in my personal journey with medicine, it's been a very deep teaching of non-attachment. And the medicine that came on my path, which wasn't the classical where people say, I was laying on this bed in a maloca with ayahuasca, and Mama Ayahuasca said, you will facilitate. No, that's not what happened. I purged many, many times, and there was no divine message for me. But what happened is that at the age of 14, I did my first psilocybin ceremony, because mushrooms in the Netherlands were legal at that time. Now we only have truffles in legality. So this is a long time ago, 34 years ago. That was my first experience. Now, at the age of 14, I also want to say, I don't say that every 14-year-old should do drugs or psychedelics or anything. At that time, that was very categoristic to me, and I already had a very highly developed intuitive capacity, and my mother knew what I was doing. So I just wanted to say that there was a caretaker present and had the full discernment with me why I was doing that. Now, it was recreational. It wasn't a ceremonial setting. But that year, there was a very deep spiritual awakening for me. That whole year, everything unfolded. Now, catapulting us into here and now, when I got the invitation, it's really interesting because I never felt the calling to be a facilitator, but my path actually started a decade ago by helping people to integrate. So I wasn't facilitating. I had my own personal experiences with different medicines and had done my own work. But this was why integration was so important in all my work that I do. It's because this is how life taught me. Life started giving me clients that had really severe spiritual questions, emergencies, depersonalization, facilitation challenges, traditional challenges, how the container was held. And somehow people were referring to me because I could make a bridge of expanded state of consciousness, herbalism, shamanism. I understood that, and personal development. So I was starting to help people with integration. And through that integration, I started also developing a lot of judgment towards facilitation because I was getting people with a lot of challenges. So I had a lot of opinions on psychedelics and doing it in the city in an apartment, a lot. So then I got an invitation through my ex-partner to actually experience 5-MeO DMT. And then I really got a lot of resistance. And then I knew, okay, from all the work that I've done and all the spiritual paths that I walked and anything that I've ever done, you have, when you has an inner knowing that is something is not for you, which is a very soft voice. But a very loud voice is normally something up here. So that loud voice of resistance, I was like, I got to do something with you. So I'll go and meet the toad. And that's my medicine. So that's basically the medicine that I stepped into a space. I'm not going to share the story now unless it's needed, but that was where it got catapulted into the work. And I had a very generous guide who I started helping, and this is how it unfolded. And I already had a client base and a coaching practice and already did retreats, but without any substance. So, and then I never had the ambition to actually serve this medicine until literally people were ringing my doorbell and saying, I want you to serve this medicine. And I was like, well, I'm not ready. I don't know. I'm not going to do that. So I was asking my teacher at the time, I was like, do I have permission? I don't know. Like, should I do it and not do it? And he's an amazing cowboy. So he said, yeah, go ahead. And sometimes you need those lessons from teachers of the underground, you know. And if I look at it back right now and how I'm so in due diligence and ethics and taking your time and devotional practices and all of that. And at the same time, my path is just very unique to me. And I've had to walk many different walks and many different challenges in my life to come where I am. But 5-MeO, DMT, Bufa alvarius, Otak, the toad, and that medicine has been a very deep teacher. And then, of course, honoring the medicine of psilocybin, which is part of my lineage here in the Netherlands and the truffles. So that's always been in my life. So I hold those two medicines, and that's what I serve for specific programs. So each program has a specific makeup and, let's say, an intentionality for it. So, yeah. So that's, I think that was your question, right? I went a little bit sideways with it. Yeah.
No, this is incredible. And, you touched on something that I feel, or at least like resonated with me, is that oftentimes when, we are in such deep devotion to the medicine and we understand how powerful and what the potential outcomes of working with this medicine can be, both for the participants in ceremonies and, of course, for the facilitators as well, is that we tread so carefully and we really try to not overstep our boundaries, not to do anything that maybe potentially be irresponsible, to not do harm. And sometimes I feel it gets to a point where we are literally holding ourselves back, right? And what happens is that there are a lot of people in the field that may be less skilled, less trained, a lot less experienced, but what they do have is just the confidence in themselves, and they just like jump into the pool, and they're the ones that end up providing these services, which potentially can create more harm in the community, can create more undesired outcomes. So I think this was just a great reminder for those listeners who are on the path, that have been, what some people like to say, doing the work, experiencing, have done their integration work, are trained, have their mentors, to just, I feel like this is the time for the healers to really take a step forward and to not second guess themselves. I think learning through imperfect action is actually a really important part of the psychedelic renaissance. So I just wanted to stick that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also believe that those that have walked this path way before and have served medicines in the underground, they had to step into it. Right. A lot of them, right? So also acknowledging that we've come to a place where suddenly there is a mass need, a mass interest. So our mass responsibility is also very different. One of the things that I share with, for example, clients that come to me or participants that come to me for any type of work is the due diligence that I do in the screening process, the questions. I do interviews with every single person myself. I never give that to any other team member or any other person. Why is that? Is because I see that the impact isn't a responsibility not only to that individual, it is also in my personal life. But it's not only my life, it's also my family. And not only my family, it's my friends. It's the people that I'm actually at the same time working with for them, the venues that we are working with, all of it, and then the whole ecosystem. So imagine that something does happen into your container, and that comes out. That has an impact on every single person that is doing their work. It has, immediately, especially if you have a headline somewhere in a newspaper. So I always try to also inform clients that the choices that I sometimes make to actually say no is not only for the individual safety, but I don't have the capacity to hold every single person and nuance what they're coming into. Because that's a big responsibility. Their process is not my responsibility, but keeping them safe in my container is, right? So I think you're also speaking into that kind of discernment and that kind of leadership style of understanding what your capacity is and most like what your capacity isn't. And sometimes when you have the confidence to step into something, that's great for the initial push of doing, but then it's really important to have then go backwards a little bit and see, okay, can I make a list of things that I don't know? And what are the type of clients that I could not serve? So you can recognize them, right? So you can actually see and be honest, and then inform yourself with type of other practitioners or people around, make relationships and forward them, when they're specialized in that. So that's always been my go-to. I don't have to serve everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're speaking to is the nuance of understanding and owning that every person that steps into your field does impact you. And basically, when their state gets altered, your state gets altered as well. Like we literally share in that field of consciousness when whatever they bring into the space and whatever gets expressed through them. And of course, the same is true for us. And then we are dancing in that space together. And their dance informs ours. And then, of course, we take that and it does undulate onto our community. So I think you're speaking to the level of responsibility on all the different layers of reality and consciousness and across time and space, which is such a nuanced understanding of this work. And I love that. Thank you for speaking to that. So who are the people that come knocking on your retreat?
Yes. So I'm based in Europe, right? So I work primarily in the Netherlands, where it's legal to work, or in Portugal, where it's decriminalized. But decriminalized is very, very important to understand that there are a certain set of things you can and cannot do in terms of how you serve it and how a client comes to you. And there's a lot of nuances in that. But in the Netherlands, so the type of people are global. I have to say, there are people from all countries, from Australia, the UK, US, anywhere. Anywhere. So that's one. That's always very exciting. And then there is majority of people, I call it, they are at a stage of a crossroads. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have experience with an expanded state of consciousness externally infused, let's say. But most of them are on a kind of a crossroad, are at an age or a place where they're starting to see it's now time to maybe heal or actually learn about myself deeper, So, and then there is a level of people, I call them those that have understanding that psychedelics could impact their mental and emotional health, but also have an understanding in terms of the responsibility that you need to take for the full process. It's because the programs that I create are never just a one-day in and out experience. It's most of the time multiple days, 5 days, multiple ceremonies, and a full-on online integration and preparation. So it takes about 7 weeks. That asks a full dedication. So people that come understand that it's a process, and there is a method and there is a layeredness to it. So that's another aspect, that people really are willing to go into the experience in that way. And then the age group, and that's, the age group varies very much. Because like my youngest was 21, my oldest was 83. And everything in between, parents with their adult children, elderly parents with their adult children, to siblings and everything. There is one retreat program that we created over the years, which is more focused on self-leadership. And it doesn't mean that you need to be an executive in the realm of corporate business to run and manage a group of people, but those that understand that impact and change really starts with, can I take that, that discernment, that responsibility, the words we just use naturally out of ourselves, but that self-leadership. So it's more of a leadership program. And then looking at from the perspective of self into, okay, at the stage of any development, we go from self to a consciousness of we, right? There is a process in there that happens. So that's where we are. And people with self-leadership, but also I've done many women's groups, many women's retreat, and our 5-MEO retreats are very different. Our very small groups is more of an initiation process in there as well. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What have you seen are some common themes that are expressed through all these different people that come to the retreats?
Good question. Well, I think the most common theme that I've received over the last years is probably the question, what is my purpose? And that's, to me, is always a very interesting question. Because when people ask that question, a lot of the times it's not necessarily the answer that they're looking for that's showing up, right? So you really have to prepare from witnessing how the medicine works with those questions. You have to prepare people to be willing to look at their own, why are they asking the question, and how can we? It's almost neurolinguistic programming before you go in, and really untangle the question first. And really deeply understand, because the medicine will never give you that answer that they think they're going to receive. Because even if you know your purpose, you're still going to have challenges in your life. Even if you're mission driven, even if you have the impact that you've always wanted, even if you're in the job that you always wanted to do, or the family constellations you always wanted to have, you're still going to have the challenges that you're going to have at that stage of your journey, right? So it's preparing people to understand those perspectives, and then to be able to surrender into it as much as they can. You can only do so much in X amount of days, right? But as much as we can. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then that is such a timely question right now, with world events, conflict, wars, suffering, and there's a lot of resistance coming up for people, resistance in terms of like political resistance. People are becoming more vocal about the injustices that they see in the world. And this is typically the time when people begin to question themselves, question their human experience, question their own happiness. And therefore they're either, like you say, at a crossroads, but they're either ready and prepared to just go down the path of change, or they're not ready and prepared, but they're unhappy and they get catapulted or throttled onto the path of transformation. And that's, again, I think, you're right. Like, they come in with a question of what is my purpose, but then they realize, okay, well, what is the true source of my unhappiness or my lack of satisfaction? Or of my not understanding how to deal or work with or play the game of life in a way that does bring me greater joy and meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also believe that that's in last year, we launched our first online conference called Stewards of the Sacred. And in that online conference, it was so interesting because there were so many speakers. It was almost like it was orchestrated. And the only thing I was doing was witnessing. I guess you observe that as well from a podcast, is sometimes there is a theme in the air and everybody touches on the theme from a slightly different perspective. And the theme there was a lot about how to answering, and a lot of elders that showed up who set the tone, and then other people just wove into it, was a lot about reestablishing trust with spirit. And it's almost like that relationship with the divine, the sacred, spirit, the intuitive, the feminine, all of these layers. It's initiating that space of trust. And in that trust, the meaning making and purpose a lot of the time gets answered. And then when we move from that place of right relationship with our environment, that interconnectedness, that nature relationship even, right? From that place, you come into a lot more understanding about legacy. You know, if you don't want to use the word stewardship, maybe more legacy, or what is my impact in the world? And that could be very small, that just your neighbor, having a garden together outside, like these kind of things. Sometimes we think our purpose are these big things. They're great if you can do big things, but sometimes it needs to be really small in your own environment. So I think one of the key things for a lot of people that shows up in ceremony is the quality of cultivating trust. And that inner sovereignty and that inner knowing. You can't fake authenticity. It's like you can feel it. You can feel the resonance of the heart and someone that is being authentically themselves and creativity and expressing. And, we are so attuned to that as humans, right? So, yeah.
I love that. And I think if I can add to that, is, the question of what is my purpose can also be seen as, well, how can I serve in my highest expression, in my highest authenticity, and in my highest and greatest joy? And typically when we can basically check off these three categories, and then some people can see it as being on purpose, living on purpose, and being in the flow of the Dharma that was meant for me in this lifetime. Yeah. How do you support your clients in reintegrating back into their life after the retreat? Again, like big questions like, what is my purpose? So like, do you help them build the garden, or do you help them like create a plan to create like a bigger legacy? How do you do that?
There are some basic activities that we do in the retreat itself. So for me, it's really, really important. And this comes from, if anybody's ever done any good personal development course, this skill set. If you are in a course and you make a choice in the course and already make an action point in the course, you're double the likelihood of you actually following through. It's not rocket science. That's just human behavior. So I'm a studier of human behavior. So a lot of the times what we do in retreat is in the preparation, there is already a practice and a setup and a framework that helps the integration. Actually, integration is great, but without good in preparation, that will set the tone. You will also be able to see as a facilitator or practitioner where the people are, how they're dedicating their time, not to judge what they're doing, people have their lives, but you can really see where they need the support for extra. Some people just don't have the mental capacity to learn a new skill set because they're in a high overwhelmed stress. And they need the retreat to be nurtured and held for a moment, not to have 500 new meditation activities and so many goals and all of that. So the most important thing is, yes, I personally have a framework and a method, but I'm consistently looking at where is the person? What can they hold? And what do they need? What does every individual need in the group? And then make it coherent as the group goes through the stages, right? So the integration process then is really about creating that beginning framework in the retreat itself. So they have those action points, and then helping them following through and guiding the way into it. Now, for some, it may actually look that they need external support, extra support. And luckily, I have a very good database of people that are following through. But some of them in our intake conversation. So I have, of course, a screening call, and then I also do deep dives on their intention one-to-one before the retreat. If I already can see that they might need some support, and 9 and 10 times for the experience that I have, I can already assess that. We already put things in place for afterwards. So it doesn't come too much as a surprise, or it's already taking that adulthood and taking care of that inner child of, we're going on a holiday, we're packing our bag, then we're coming back, like them doing that with themselves, adulting themselves, right? So giving that responsibility to them. So there is a lot of layers into it. And of course, we can name the different integration tools and things that's nowadays you can find them anywhere. There are many different ways, but for me, it's the most important thing that by the time we hold our last group call, if I see there is someone still, let's call it discombobulated in their process, I'm very hands-on with regular check-ins, with emails, offering another extra call, and sometimes it's not reimbursed. I just do that because it's important in the integrity of the work. Especially with some people coming in with scholarship, they might need it. But we also have a community platform, education platform, and people have access for a whole year for free when they come to a retreat. And they will receive integration tools and ongoing calls and processes. The interesting thing, what I've observed over the years, is that everything is there for people to make use, but it's a very small percentage from people that actually use it. So it's fine by me as long as I offer it, it's offered,
Right.
But it's actually a very small percentage of people that life says when they go back, in the ideal world, what I would create, actually that experience, and then a month nature immersed integration where they're just in community and serving. And that would be the idea. But yes, so that's a whole different financial cost, but for people. But that would be the most, impactful, I think, for the majority of people, is rebuilding that relationship with nature and community.
Yeah, absolutely. You're touching upon a bigger issue in the psychedelic renaissance, that I'm seeing as an integration educator. But a lot of people have heard the word integration. But number one, they don't know exactly what it means because we don't have a lot of research or science around it. Plus, it's super new. That, like you said, it's exactly I would say a decade old, if that. And then secondly is that we don't have the educational systems in place yet for people to understand that the journey, the ceremonial journey, the medicine journey, or the psychedelic trip, whatever you want to call it, is one tool and one event and a much longer chain of events, or a much bigger container where we utilize that tool to create some type of a disruption. But it's not what's necessarily going to grant you the results. The results are going to be an outcome of multiple tools that were put in place. And integration actually begins, as far as I'm concerned, as far as my understanding of the field, the way that I've come to realize it through my work, again, in a decade of studying and trying to narrate what integration is integration begins not the moment that you're done with the ceremony, but the moment that the idea, the seedling, or the desire, or the call to try medicine is planted in your mind and soul and psyche. So at that moment, that's where your integration journey begins. And then, of course, preparation is part of integration. It's one of the first primary steps of the bigger integration system. They're not separate as far as I see them. So yeah, everything that you say makes perfect sense, is that you have to lay down the foundations of the longer term integration and the initial stage of the long-term journey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So okay, what are some practical integration tools then that maybe you can share with our audience, especially after 5-MeO DMT, which I think is very unique in the medicinal space?
Yeah. For the majority of people after 5-MeO, there is a real importance to deepen a meditation practice. Because there is a pathway that you suddenly have access to, and the thing that you do more of, it will consist. So it doesn't matter what transcendental meditation, Zen meditation, visualization meditation, mindfulness meditation, it doesn't matter what type, whatever resonates with you, whatever you're inclined. But that will help you very much to also create a moment of a pause between the thought that you're having, the identification of the thought, and the action you want to take from that. Because 5-MAO is such a liminal space where you go into. I call it the languageless space. Your consciousness gets picked up and you're thrown into the soup of the bigger consciousness. And now make sense of it. And a lot of the times the sense making is really, really hard, especially for people that do not have a specific personal development or spiritual practice. It's really hard to frame these things. So if you're new and you're undergoing 5-MAO DMT, this could be really, really helpful to really create like a pause between that. So, and also there is an enhancement of self-awareness and intuitive capacity, which you can really helps you in that. So really feeling your body is probably one of the most important things next to that. One of the most changes that I've seen people do, which was not on their intention form, is a natural change to their relationship to their body and their food. With 5-MAO, it's been really, really big. From really stopping with alcohol, coffee, cigarettes, just they didn't come to stop with any of it, but it just happened. And some of them still for years later, I get emails and it's still the case. So integrating in a new relationship between their body awareness and anything body related and somatic related. So for me, there's many apps you can do now with physical exercises, and there's a few that even do somatic exercises, very simple somatic exercises. And I would say, do things that are simple. Just don't overcomplicate it. Do simple things, especially if they're new to you, if you're just starting. So it's very much meditation, food and body related, somatic nervous system related, any around that. And I believe journaling is still one of the most potent things you can do, is free writing in that space. And then it also depends, and I think journaling everybody could resonate with. I personally have dyslexia, so journaling sometimes after a medicine journey is not what my brain can do, but I record voice memos. So that's also a way you can be creative in that. So keeping it simple. So going back to the basics in terms of the practices that you can do. And the most lush thing that anybody can do, even not having a medicine journey, is just going into nature, Go have a swim in a river, go sit by a tree, even if it's cold, take 3 deep breaths in, and just be with yourself, rest, be in silence. I think that's what our society needs, rest and silence. So even if you're not taking anything, go for it.
No, this is exactly, so what is coming up for me now when you say rest and silence? I feel like a lot of people come to the retreats with the bigger questions or to deal with the symptoms of mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, that are really the outcome of a stressful lifestyle. And, I work with my clients and I basically express to them, before we look at the bigger visions, right? Let's make sure that you're all dialed in on your sleep habits, on your nutrition, and on movement. Because really without those 3 in place, we can try to treat the depression until, years from now, but it's not going to sustain.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're really just super tired, honestly. I don't really this is people are exhausted, not just from the day-to-day, but this is years and decades and centuries of systemic workaholism that we are literally dismantling from our system.
Yeah.
So I feel like rest is such a countercultural, rebellious integration act even. Just sleep. It's okay. You literally don't need to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And boredom. So it's really, really important for the development of someone in their teenage years to not do much, to be boredom. That's really good for our brain, but it's also good for our adult brains. So being resting and not doing anything, not having a game, not having your phone, not having all of that. And I don't think I'm saying anything that new to anybody here. I think everybody goes like, yeah, I don't know it, but have you done it? Like, and do we do it? No, we don't. When is the last time that you've put your phone off for a day? What about 3 days that you didn't put your phone on? What about a week? Do you plan those moments in? I know we have to plan these things in, but if you start with that, and when I personally do my own solo work, I always go, okay, what is it? Why am I wanting to do my solo work? First of all, my own intention. And then I always go with a sense of reverence and respect for the medicine, that I don't go in with the expectations. Now, I've been a bit complacent. I haven't been meditating so much. So let me just go and do the medicine, and then, I'll meditate better after. That's not how I approach it. I actually start being really strict with myself way before, and start adjusting my behaviors as a way of being a devotee, and as a respect to the medicine that I'm going in. I'm willing to do this already. My basic things that I know that I'm not being complacent about, that I'm not taking care of myself, or those kind of things. And then the things about the me that I cannot see, which is more of the shadow aspect of selves that you can't see, then you're resourced to see them, because you've already taken this responsibility about your basic things that you know. Everybody knows the basic stuff that they should be better at, or get up that earlier hour in a day and sit by themselves if they have a busy family life. Everybody knows what they need to do. But if you do them before going in, there is a very different relationship with any compound. And then especially with your integration process afterwards. There is for me, there is always a sense of completion then afterwards, or a sense of gratification, because there is a meeting of two parts that are then willing to go deeper, or do the work, as they say, right? Yeah.
100%. And it's that discipline, really, speaking about the aspect of discipline. And yet, like you say, things that we all know. But the idea of integration is that actually, it really doesn't matter almost what practice you take. It's just showing up for yourself, and showing up for those practices that make you feel nourished, good, well rested, and eliminate, at least at the most basic level, the physical reaction, the depletion, right? The energetic depletion. Once you take care of those, you'll be surprised actually how empowered you may feel, and how capable you may feel. Yeah. And you won't need to return to the medicine as much, probably, because you will already have that, again, that, like you said, I love how you said, resource. You'll be well resourced enough to be able to meet your shadow at any time. You won't even have to go to ceremony to be able to see it, because you live life in that way. So this is literally integration, is to get to that place where we're able to live that medicinal wisdom at any day without the need to go back to ceremony constantly, right? Because you're living in that present moment, in that field constantly. You're in the dialogue. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I do have one more question before we wrap up the episode. You mentioned something in the beginning of the interview about how so many amazing people have been doing this underground work and hold such wisdom. And yet we are seeing, again, that when you have a PhD, it is easier to get your foot in the door, basically. It's just kind of automatically positions you in a different, it just automatic hierarchy. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, and it doesn't necessarily, as we know, right, based on where society is at now, PhDs and medical, whatever medical degree doesn't necessarily mean a golden standard. It doesn't necessarily mean wellness or excellence. So what needs to happen in our industry to get to this type of golden standard without the risk of once again falling into outdated and harming systems?
That's a really good question, and I don't know if I have the answer for that, because I think it's a living, breathing question for where we are all at as an ecosystem. And you know, one thing that I've learned from this work is every time I had a preference or an idea that maybe it should be this way, very soon I learned, oh, no, that's not the way. So I do think the basics, what needs to happen is the bridging of many ways of knowing needs to be acknowledged. And I think it needs to be done by people from all parts that come together, by just their presence of their togetherness says that. It sometimes doesn't need to be necessarily the action immediately, but just the acknowledgement of the bridging. I think a lot of this work that, I believe very much in the therapeutic model, and depending on the method, depending on the purpose of the client, depending on many different things. But there is a very big thing that I feel that needs to be acknowledged, is an expanded state of consciousness is a transpersonal shamanic process of rites of passage or rebirthing. That is not a therapeutic method. That has therapeutic outcomes. Yes, great. But the journey, the experience, it's, and I'm saying the word feminine, not as the gender women, but it is a feminine process that is a very natural process of chaos and rebirth, and that process, that energetics, that kind of cosmology that many traditions have honored in that specific way, I feel that that's where the acknowledgement needs to be, first and foremost. That process in itself, you cannot copy paste it, you cannot own it, you cannot claim it, you cannot patent it, that's the word, McDonald's it, all of these things. And I don't know if we ever will get there in that kind of point. But I do believe there are people here and in this space that are willing to find ways. And at this moment, I'm actually a consultant with a group of clinicians creating a clinic, and they've actually asked me to be the voice of this, so they don't forget. Because they are so this part of the brain and methodic and rational and all these things, which is also important. And I have to say, I'm very much like that too. My personality is very, a personality as well. So I'm not saying, but I feel there needs to be a flavor of acknowledgement of the actual journey of the individual, that is not something that you can own. You cannot own magic. You cannot own that kind of space. So, yeah, and how that would look, how that moving forward. Now, I think by people like, for example, these clinicians, myself, you, if we take the responsibility that we always extend a hand to a party that's maybe opposite of us, and we take the responsibility and say, okay, let me listen, what can I learn from this situation? Continue to be a student, then at least we're contributing to creating more and more and more of that consciousness. So that's at least how I want to show up. And I've learned a lot from researchers, and I'm contributing, also advising at a research group in the Netherlands with 5-MeO DMT and treating alcoholism. So there is so much, there are bridges wanting to take, and there are people wanting to do it, right? But how the structure of a training program needs to be, I've been mulling over this for many, many years, and I've never launched any of a training program because I don't have the answer yet. Not to say that the things that are out there are not intentional or have value or, have good content. Yes, I've seen many, and I'm sometimes a guest faculty at some of the trainings. But in essence, 9 months online will give you a mental overview. But the process, again, is a nervous system embodied process, which we have to look more at an apprenticeship kind of way of learning, I believe. and that's not cost effective, that you can't train hundreds of people in one go while the need is so high. So there's so many layers to it. So this is a little bit how my brain is functioning today. And maybe if you ask me this question in 9 months' time, I might give a different answer, but this is how I'm sitting with it today.
No, it's everything. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It was extremely nuanced and perfect. And thank you for that. Thank you for such a beautiful interview. We always love to conclude with a rapid fire round to discover 5 epic facts about you. You willing to play?
Sure.
Excellent.
Curious. I also do something like that in my own podcast.
Oh,
so
do you?
it's fun. It's fun. Finally,
Okay.
I receive one.
Okay, let's play. What's your favorite psychedelic, Natasha?
My favorite psychedelic? No, I have to choose? Oh, no, I can't choose. It's like, who's your favorite kid?
Who's your favorite child?
It's my favorite child. No, I'm not going to say that. Well, okay, so you know what? I'll say something very controversial. I'll say the one that I've never experienced, and that is calling me, which is iboga. Okay. So I'll say that.
Thank you. What's your favorite thing to do after a ceremony?
Laugh and dance.
Yes. What's one big lesson psychedelics and plant medicines have taught you?
Don't take yourself so serious.
Who is one person, dead or living, that you would love to sit in ceremony with?
Oh, that I would love to sit in ceremony with. It's really odd, but somehow Marilyn Monroe is coming to my mind, but I don't know even. I don't even know why. But another one would be, it's really funny. It's just really random, but I think
that's interesting.
I think I'm curious about a woman in her time, in her space, and going back in time and sitting in that kind of space. So I'm curious about a time. And it's very random. It's a very random thought that came in. But I would also love to actually sit with my father, which I don't think he ever will. But yeah, so that's a more personal one.
Okay, and thank you. And what's your secret to living epic?
What's my secret to living epic? I want to say something. I don't know if I should say it. I know if I say it. Keep on nurturing my sexual stamina.
Yes.
I'm not going to give any wise wisdom.
No need.
No, you know, like I'm 44 and I'm in a really great time of my life. And I'm almost 45. And this is the years that I'm going like, I figured some things now out, you know, so.
It's a good era, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's a good era. Enjoy and pleasure in play. How can listeners connect with you?
My name is my website, so natashapelgrom.com. And then, of course, we have Awaken the Medicine Within, which is our retreat and education platform that we launched in 2017 above ground. So that's a way. And of course, Stewards of the Sacred, our conference, any shape or form. Social media, I'm on there, but I'm personally not on there. So if you want to send a personal message, email is always the best.
Awesome. Yeah. And of course, we'll have all of these links in our show notes. Natasha, thank you so much. This was such a deep and fun and gorgeous interview. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone who was listening. And thank you, of course, to Mose for his beautiful music. And remember, it's not the psychedelic, it's the integration.